co-authors here sooner or later, right?
Yeah.
Welcome back, everybody. This is segment two on Lead with Giants TV. My
Hey.
name is Tal Schnell, I'm the host this evening, and welcome everybody on our show program. Second segment here is Overcoming Fake Talk. John Stoker with us. How to hold real conversation that create respect, build relationships, and get results. John, welcome to our show.
Thank you.
All right, let's go around the room, do a quick introduction, and let's start with Liz, please.
I'm Liz Stinselli, hanging out with you again from Salt Lake City, Utah.
Great to have you this evening.
Hey everybody, I'm Dan Forbes, founder of Lead with Giants and hanging out from Sarasota, Florida. Good to be here with everybody.
Welcome, Dan. And can you share with us the picture behind you there? Is there a significance?
That's the Great Chinese Wall.
Oh, so it's part of it. You brought it back to Florida.
It's a dressing screen, and believe me, you want me on this side.
Okay. The dressing screen of Queen such and such of China. I should have said something like that. But John, welcome. Introduce yourself to the group as well.
I'm John Stoker. I'm the founder and president of Dialogue Works and the author of Overcoming Fake Talk.
All right, great to have you here. Lots of good insights. So let's talk about how leaders can create an upward spirals, elevating and uplifting people in their conversations.
All right, so let's talk about what a spiral is so people kind of know.
Sure.
Yeah, you want me to give my example?
No, I don't want to give your example.
Okay.
I'll give one from the book.
Good idea.
This was a friend of mine who basically had gone to the Bahamas. Actually, he was the senior vice president of human resources, and he was in a meeting, and one of the guys on the team had gone to the Bahamas, and after the meeting, he was walking out, and his friend said, "Man, you got a terrific tan." And he says, "That's me, tall, black, and handsome." And a woman on the team just so happened to be African American, and she says, I resent that remark. And he said, "No, you resemble that remark." And she said, "You're being very offensive." And he says, "No, I'm not." And she says, "Yes, you are. I think that's very disparaging to me and my race." And he said, "Well, get over it." And she says, "I'm not going to get over it. I want to talk about it." And he says, "Well, I don't." And he walked off. That's an example of a spiral. So what happens in spirals is we hear people and we jump to conclusions, negative conclusions about them, and then what we do is we react. And so he reacted to what she said, and then she jumped to a more negative conclusion about what he said, and she reacted to that. So you get the notion that it's kind of spiraling downward. And so it was over when he said, "I'm not talking about it," and he walked off. So what she then went and did is filed a complaint with legal, and it continued to spiral down. So spirals are pretty typical. And when I first saw them years ago, I thought, gosh, why instead of creating a downward spiral, don't we engage in upward spirals, where rather than assuming the worst about a person and then reacting to that and saying something or doing something negative, which they're then going to interpret negative and then react to that, and then we're off to the races. If we could just recognize what was going on, then maybe we could create an upward spiral or lift the conversation above the threshold or above the line. So in the book, there's a graphic with two arrows that are pointed in different directions, and in the middle there's kind of a line drawn. And so I just wanted to come up with a simple way to get people thinking about what's happening in conversation. That they
Dan, I
could,
think is showing that right now.
yeah, I can see that, where people are more aware of what's going on. So the challenge is for a leader, to come back to your question, Tal, or anybody, is to recognize what's going on in the conversation that tells you it's kind of dove below the line or the threshold into the realm of ineffectiveness. So some people will go to flight, right? They'll be quiet, they won't say anything, they'll agree, and it's the aggressive people that I like, because you can tell what's going on with them, where they start name calling or rolling their eyes or, "Oh really, come on," doing those kind of things that are telling you that, they're below the line. So when you see those behaviors, the easiest way to lift the conversation from going, if you will, below the line to above, or to reverse a spiral, is to ask questions. Even if it's to say, gosh, I notice you just rolled your eyes. I'm thinking that you don't agree with something that I just said. Tell me what you're thinking. Do you agree? Do you not agree? Or tell me where you disagree. And the more questions I ask, the more I shift the conversational direction and change the dynamic. So now what we're doing is thinking, we're exchanging ideas, we're learning from each other, and we're more in a position to try to, I guess, resolve the conversation.
So what I'm hearing you saying is it's almost describing a moment where we are learning from one another, we are dropping the assumptions and the judgments about a certain behavior that somebody may have contributed, or we may interpret in our own internal dialogue that someone is attacking us or judging us. We need to stay away from that as much as possible.
So notice you're just describing recognizing and suspending. Mm-hmm. So rather than take your eye roll as an attack on me, I'm not even going to go there. I might basically articulate, I just saw you roll your eyes, and I'm thinking you really don't agree. Is that accurate? I'm going to use some of those conversational skills that we talked about in the last segment to change what's happening in the conversation. So I'd recognize it, I'd express what I'm seeing, I'd ask questions to get deeper, if that makes sense.
Thank you.
Yeah, so, I'm also thinking sort of a guardrail type of concept as well. When we're having a conversation with someone, when we recognize that, we're bumping against the guardrails, or the conversation is, then, we have to take responsibility for that. Going back to the first segment, John, when this downward spiral, we recognize it happening. Obviously, we as a leader or someone that wants to be better at communicating really needs to take responsibility for bringing it back on track. What you mentioned questions, so we can do that by asking questions. What are other ways that we can bring that conversation back above the line and turn that downward spiral into an upward spiral? What else?
Well, Dan, I tried to make it easy, and so questions is probably the easiest way to do it. The harder part I've found is that people don't recognize what's happening in the moment until it's too late. And so, I could tick off a list of 20 things that people ought to pay attention to, like what's going on with emotion, right? What's the tone of voice? What are people doing with their hands gesture-wise? I mean, are they going, I just threw it out with the bathwater, right, if I did that? Well, and then listen to how I inflected the word well. So I'm looking at a whole variety of different kind of behaviors that a person is demonstrating to me that tells me that they're not on board or not on track or even in disagreement. And so I'll ask questions, and then I'll listen and observe what they're doing. And then I'll ask more questions. Now, if that doesn't work, I can't obviously make somebody engage, but again, I think I can increase the likelihood of helping them to engage if we're going to get anywhere. If somebody was frightfully angry to the point that they'd lost all rationality, when that happens, I'll often blame myself. Like if I'm in an interaction with my spouse and she wants to talk about something but she's hot and it's not getting calmer, I may say, you know what, I'm a little frustrated at what's going on right now. I can't talk about it. I need some time to think it through. Please excuse me, and then I'll leave. Because I know that she's in a place in her brain, for example, where she's not going to be able to process it. And if she's had a chemical dump, I know that it's going to take a while before those emotions subside. But again, I'm managing it, and I'm not saying, well, if you'd calm down, we could talk about this, which is the typical response that people awfully will engage in, which actually escalates the situation.
John, while you're talking about that quickly, can you give us some more suggestions for managing emotions if we're not in a situation where we can walk away and take a break?
Good luck. No. So now here's the thing. All right, so here's a few. I guess one of the things I'd say first, Liz, is that if the conversation is important, perhaps you ought to balance its importance with the importance of handling it or talking about it right then. Because if it's important and the person can't, I guess if you want to say, get a grip, then it's not, whatever you do is not going to work. In fact, sometimes I've tried a number of different things, and I'll detail some of those, but the person will actually escalate, which tells me they're too far gone. And literally what happens is the amygdala, the reptilian part of our brain, has so got them going that the higher functioning regions of the brain have shut down, and they're not rational. And so that's something to try to understand. So here are some things you could do. One, the easiest way is to ask a person questions. And the reason is a person can't answer questions in their reptilian brain. They literally have to go to their neocortex, the higher functioning region of the brain, to answer questions. So if you could get them to answer, they're actually physiologically moving to a different place. So the more questions you ask and they can answer, you'll notice that the emotion subsides. That's one. Two, it helps to reflect to a person the emotion that they're seeing. And I would add to that not all people get emotional, right? Some people may get very upset and just remain silent. So you can reflect behavior and you can reflect words. So I could say, I can see you're upset, Liz. Or I could say, Liz, I noticed you haven't said anything in an hour in the heat of this discussion we're having as a team. Or I could say, Liz, I noticed you just said, oh, great. Right? So I'm basically reflecting to you your words. Now, the reason reflecting is important is because when you reflect a person's behavior to them, literally what their brain says to them is this: hey, they're on our side. If you said to somebody, well, if you'd calm down for a moment, Liz, maybe we could talk about it, you know what your brain says to you? They're not on our side, get ready to rumble. And it ratchets up the fight response. So reflecting a person's emotion, their words or their action, has a calming effect on an individual, and then I'll follow that with a question. I can see you're upset. Tell me what's going on. Or I noticed you haven't said anything in an hour. What are you thinking about what we're talking about? So notice how I follow it with a question. Now, you can't do this third one. Maybe you could, but physiologically, if I said, Liz, let's not talk here where everybody can hear us. Let's go up to the second-story conference room where we can have some privacy. If I could get you to walk up the stairs with me to that location, what happens literally physiologically is your legs say to your brain, we need more blood and more oxygen here. And it short circuits the emotional neural network that's firing, which has the effect of lessening your emotion. It would be like me saying, if you can get down on the floor and give me 50 sit-ups, then we could talk about it.
Yeah, let's run around the block.
Yeah, it's that kind of an effect. And
let's talk while we jog. I like it.
So really, doing something physically, will help as well. And there's kind of three things that you can do. But once if a person's amygdala has signaled the adrenal glands at the top of your kidneys to dump epinephrine, norepinephrine, cortisol, adrenaline, a whole bunch of other chemicals into your bloodstream to prepare you for fight or flight, the research says that it takes 48 hours to get those chemicals out of your bloodstream. And so, when I typically say that to audiences, people will say, oh, that's what's wrong with my boss. Because I have a boss that's always angry. And I'll say that could be the case. Somebody who's always in protective, reactive mode may be angry a lot, and it's a function of kind of where they are in their brain. Does that help?
Yeah,
Absolutely.
it's funny because we actually do a mastermind group about the same topic. So she relates very well to that. So
Do you want to add something, Liz, that I missed?
No, that was very helpful. That was fantastic. Thank you.
Well, to that last point, people get addicted to adrenaline. They get addicted to those chemicals, and so they don't even realize that they are, they're out of control because they're seeking that chemical release inside of their body constantly.
Yeah, and then they die early.
Yeah. John, it sounds like we're talking a lot about empathy and understanding, how important that is to have these meaningful conversations, where especially when you're in a situation where you don't see eye to eye at that moment and it could be the heat of the moment, how important that, just listening to your answer a moment ago, sounds like if we can be wiser about having empathy, listening, and understanding the other person, then we're creating that space that we can project better conversation, right?
Yes, in fact, if I tune up a little bit, here's what I found is interesting. Is we said in the last segment, Liz brought up that most people will avoid conflict like the plague. They don't know what to do with emotion. And here's the way I kind of like to look at emotion. That emotion is the symbol of a violated value. And I'm talking negative emotion. So if I said to one of you, Guy, I really like your blouse, Liz, or I really like your shirt, Tal, and you'd think, oh, thanks. Notice the positive emotion that we feel or experience is the symbol of a value affirmed. Whereas when people get negative or their emotions are hot, it's really a symbol of a violated value. So once we recognize that, two things ought to occur to us. It's a person's feelings, not ours, which means we shouldn't take it personal. So in essence, a person gets emotional because they're interpreting something that you're saying or doing negatively. So the challenge then becomes to realize that emotion is the mask of meaning. So I have to get past the emotion to get to what's driving the feeling, to get to the meaning. And the way we do that, we just talked about, is ask questions. Of course, I have a model in the book that we call the EASE model. EASE is an acronym for ego, aim, stories, and emotion. And in the book, we talk about how to diffuse the emotion and get to the story and the aim and the ego piece that's driving all that. And I have a tendency to think of ego not negatively, although I think the word ego, he has an ego, she has an ego, has a negative connotation. Ego is really how we value ourselves. And we're all invested in esteeming ourselves well. So the person at work who spends a lot of time on a report, in their mind, they're thinking they did a great job. They have a value for excellence in how they put together something for you. And then I walk in as the boss and I go, well, this isn't what I wanted. Notice you can hear my emotion in the way I say that, which means a value for me has been violated. And then the person shoots back with, well, what do you mean? I just did what you said. And now I'm hearing their emotion, but behind that emotion is, hey, I have a value for following directions and for doing exactly as you tell me to do. But we get caught up in the emotional front of that interaction and never know how to diffuse the emotion and get to the meaning or the value that the person has. So for me, emotions is fun stuff, because it's what everybody kind of is afraid of and doesn't know how to handle. So if we could just learn to get past the emotion to what's behind it, then we could solve problems more easily.
All good ideas, and John is talking about a lot of stuff that's here that if you're the audience, this is a great book to dive into, maybe possibly do a mastermind group with you at some point, John, hopefully. And
Sure.
there's Dan's got his book too as well. So a lot of things to dive, and we'll close here the second segment. And John, thank you so much for being here.
Oh, thanks for having me. Great to meet you folks.
Thanks a lot,
Great.
John.
All right, everybody, you can catch this. I know some of you guys were watching live right now as I see it, and but we'll have it recorded so you can watch it at your own time wherever you want to. Thanks a lot, guys.